What's going on, guys? So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about Intel and their latest Q3 earnings report. For any of you that looked at the company today, the stock flew 8% on the news. They beat their EPS, they beat revenue, and they raised guidance, and it sent investors, into a tizzy. And a lot of people are very, bullish now on Intel compared to what they have been over the past year when the stock has been continuously hammered down. So in this video, I'm going to be looking at what was said in the ER. I'm going to be taking those numbers and what the management is forecasting for Intel, put that into my model, reevaluate, okay, what do I think is a fair value to pay for this company? And then I'm going to rebalance that based on my overall portfolio, how much exposure I want to the semiconductor space, how much exposure I want to just, say, Intel, and then whether or not I think Intel right now is a good buy and whether or not I'm going to add any more shares into the portfolio. So if you guys are interested in that, make sure to stick around, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. It really means a lot to me and it helps out with the YouTube algorithm. But without further ado, let's get in the video. Alright, and so to start things off, I'm going to be reading off of my notes, because as you guys know, that I've talked about it a couple of times now, is that whenever I look at a company or whenever I evaluate it, I really like to either put my notes onto the computer or onto paper, just so I can really lay it out and not get, in a tizzy when the share price goes up or down, because obviously an 8% move in one day is a big move for Intel, especially to the upside. So if you're an Intel shareholder, I'm afraid of, getting into that greed mentality, thinking that, okay, the stock's about to rip, it's just started, it's going to keep going up from here, let me buy more shares. And I don't want to take any approach like that. I try to lay it all out, come to it with a clean head, and really assess, okay, am I going to continue with either my bullish or bearish case on the company based off of this? So now, based off what was said from the numbers that were actually given by the company, their EPS and the revenue beat what analysts were expecting. And in my opinion, if you follow this company closely and you follow the industry closely, this was pretty much, almost to be expected for months on end right now. You guys know that I talk about semiconductors a lot here on this channel, and I have been buying Intel pretty aggressively whenever there was a major sell-off because of overall fears were getting priced into the company. Now, for those of you that are kind of new to Intel and just kind of looking into it now off the earnings move, you have to understand that Intel moves, or has been moving over the past couple of years, based off of how much earnings share is going to be eaten away by AMD, because AMD has finally started to produce like competitive products, and then also what people expect the top line of Intel to be doing. So what has been the status quo over the past couple of months for people forecasting Intel is that Intel was going to lose between 1 and 5% on their top line over the next few years, and then also their overall market share is going to get whittled away. And now, based off of Intel coming out with these numbers and saying that, okay, no, in fact, our revenue is actually beating those estimates, we are going to be ending the year flat on the top line with a small bump in EPS, it means that investors were very wrong and they were too pessimistic on Intel as a company, especially in their head-to-head fight with AMD. Now, that is something that I've tried to bang the drum on for months now, over a year now at this point. Wow. I used to be an AMD shareholder. I sold out of it because I thought too much pessimism was priced into Intel as a company, and I just didn't think the numbers added up. And when I get into my cash flow model in just a bit, I thought that the amount of negative growth that Intel would have to experience to be, say in the low 40s, high 30s range, it just wasn't going to happen in my humble opinion. So I decided to start accumulating shares, and now thankfully the market has now realized that, and the market is now pricing it in accordingly based off what Intel said. Now, so other things that you want to keep note of that the company said is that they've been rolling out their 10 nanometer that is, increasing margins. Their overall margins for the year were slightly down, but moving forward, these chips at a much lower nanometer are going to improve their profits because there's actually less raw material that they have to use. Intel is their own fab, so that raw material cost, being able to cut down, is going to only boost up the margins that they get on these chips, and since they're new, they're able to inflate the price. So, it's just a win-win in terms of profitability for the company. And those chips are getting received pretty well. That's Ice Lake, that's all in the laptops and everything that are powered by Intel right now, the end, ready to be used components, say laptop, computer, all those devices. And in terms of desktop and, data center space, they're going to be rolling out their new Comet Lake line by the end of this year, hopefully, into 2020. But again, as you guys know that have been following it, take all of Intel's estimates with a grain of salt in terms of when this product line, kind of comes out, because that is why the stock has been beaten down in recent years, is because they keep pushing this back. But once that comes out and their 10 nanometer really hits the desktop platform, it is going to rival AMD's 7 nanometer. And I want to make a clarification that people think that, okay, because AMD is on a 7 and Intel's on a 10, Intel's tech is still miles behind AMD, and that's not exactly the case. Their architecture is not structured in the exact same way, so it's not an apples to apples comparison in just size. However, it is speculated that the 10 nanometer from Intel is going to be essentially as efficient as the 7 nanometer from AMD, so we're just going to be looking to see what the raw performance is. And now, speaking of data centers and PCs, Intel's overall data center mark was up just over 4%, while their PC mark was down 5% year over year. Now, that essentially equated to a flat revenue growth for the company, as I talked about earlier, but analysts were pricing in a drop of anywhere between 1 and negative 5%. So the fact that they were still able to maintain their revenue, and yeah, they're not growing as quickly, but their new emerging markets are growing quickly, and they're just losing some share to AMD because AMD just came out with a new product line. I'm pretty, satisfied with that. I thought that was pretty expected out of the company, so I'm not too worried about that. And then their EPS forecast over the next year is going to be anywhere from about negative 1.5% to roughly flat. So their EPS is going to be roughly the same year over year, but again, analysts were expecting negative EPS growth over the next couple of years. And so the fact that Intel's coming out and saying okay, no, the worst is behind us, it's going to probably either be flat from here or get better after that. A lot of people are, bidding up the stock price right now. And in my opinion, based off of what was said, I don't think that if you closely follow this company, I don't think any of this was out of the water. I think the company is now just no longer in the pessimistic pricing model that it has been in terms of analysts' expectations for them. So I think right now the company is at fair valuation if you expect nothing, spectacular to come out of the company over the next couple of years. So right now, looking at this as a company, I'm not too worried about their market share erosion from AMD. If you guys know, it's so I built this computer with an AMD processor. Full disclosure, I have the 3700X in this computer that I built earlier this year. And I'll tell you right now, for my specific use cases, the amount of money that I spent on this computer versus getting the Intel counterpart, my other Intel computer is actually sitting over there for my last build. AMD is cheaper right now, and they've always been cheaper, but now the cheaper components are, say 80% as good as the expensive components, so I was able to go with it. However, for video creators and for data centers, the, and I'm saying high tier video editors, for companies and mass movie productions, and data centers that are spending $10,000 to $50,000 per mainframe or mainframe block server farm, whatever you want to call it. And they're spending a significant amount of money on these things. Intel was always hands down, and is still hands down a better option, and that largely comes to the fact that while AMD really, introduced throwing a bunch of cores into their architecture, Intel was just still flat out faster on single-threaded performances, and the majority of applications that people use, especially in the enterprise level, are still single-threaded performance-based. And so to do an apples-to-apples comparison, if you take the top-tier Intel, consumer-grade processor currently, and you take the top-tier AMD consumer-grade processor right now, if you're throwing at Adobe, which is, 80-90% of the, creator suite type of application that you're going to be using on any high-end desktop, Intel is just still slightly better. Yeah, it's a little bit more expensive, but for these companies and these creators, they don't care about spending $100 to $200 more on a product if they know it's going to yield to them anywhere from say 5 to 10% of an increased performance boost, because they're going to get that money back at the end of the day. So looking at that from a holistic standpoint, okay, I'm not too worried about Intel and their overall market share, which is one of the big growth drivers for AMD and one of the negative catalysts for Intel. I'm not too worried about that, and I still don't see any red flags about that. I've been harping on this train for a year now. But let's go into my model and look at the fact that, okay, if you take at the growth that Intel has experienced over the past few years, say the past 5 years, and then you look at, okay, the growth that they're doing right now and everything, is ending and the world's ending. and you say that they're going to continue to grow at a, say, 0 rate, complete flat, slightly negative or slightly positive rate from here on out, and then you assume a relatively, modest to exuberant long-term growth rate for a company like Intel, and you think that more and more devices are either going to be made or less and less devices are going to be made with an Intel component in it, you get a pretty set range of values that, based off of my model, that you can kind of assume is going to be a fair price for Intel. And now that means, based off of my model and based off of all of my assumptions, which is definitely, do not take these as your numbers, these are just my spitball ideas and what I think as a company when I look at my personal investment, the company is going to be ranging anywhere from the low 50s to mid 60s. Now, right now, with Intel closing today at just over $56 a share, a lot of the potential gain that I had anticipated for the company is now gone. The company is now over 30% up from when I last bought it here when I added it to the channel's portfolio, and a lot of that is now priced in. A lot of the optimism that I thought was missing in the company is now priced in, and there's not a screaming buying opportunity in my humble opinion. However, that does not mean that the counterparts in this space are not going to have lifted up numbers because of this. I personally think that Micron and Nvidia are going to significantly benefit from Intel kind of getting their act together and really rolling out these chips. And so I think that if you believe that Intel is going to perform pretty well over the next couple of years, I think that Micron and Nvidia are going to, because they're such smaller companies, are going to capitalize on that a lot more in terms of share appreciation than Intel Corporation. Now that has some speculation into it, and then it also has the fundamentals to back it up if you look at the correlation with all these companies. So that's just my humble opinion. Now, so what does this mean for the channel portfolio? I personally think I'm going to be seeing how Intel comes out. I'm going to be waiting until I actually hear their earnings call today, and then based off that, I'm going to decide, am I going to exit my position and walk away with, say, a 30% gain, or am I going to hold on to my position and then reallocate money to the other semiconductors I think are going to benefit from this? Now, if I do sell out of Intel, as a full disclosure, I do plan on not keeping that money in cash. I plan on rotating that money into another company that I think is going to benefit from this. Probably Nvidia or Micron. Micron was coming out today and they're really trying to focus on taking market share away from Intel's memory business. And so that may or may not become a major headwind into the future when the market just wants something else to pick on Intel for, when you have a company like Micron, which is loved or hated depending on the month, coming at them in their memory, in their actual storage space for data centers. So that'll be really interesting to see how it plays out. But that's enough of my opinion. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. I would really like to hear your opinion on this space. As you guys know, I'm very passionate about semiconductors. So if you guys have anything you want to add or anything you want to, say, argue against me and say that, okay, my thinking is flawed because of X, Y, and Z, make sure to let me know in the comment section down below. I'm sure we can talk about it. I try to, talk to everybody about every comment on there, and I try to give you a non-BS answer, and I try to go in detail and explain exactly what I'm talking about. So hopefully you guys got some use out of this video. Make sure to give me a thumbs up if you haven't already, and make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't, because if you stuck around with me to the end of the video, odds are you liked a little bit of what you saw. So that's it for this video, guys. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.